Assalamu alaikum, namaste, sat sri akal and good day. You are listening to Awaz Community Radio. And today in the studio we have Afzal Khan, who is a candidate for the European Parliament. Now, if you'd like to get in touch with us, you can catch us on Facebook. It's just Awaz Community Radio. Tweet us on Awaz Radio 122 or ring us 839 7857. You can log on to our website. It's www.awazcommunityradio.com or email us awazradio@hotmail.com. Thank you for listening to Awaz Community Radio. So, as I said, we have Afzal Khan in the studio today. Thank you, Mr. Khan, for coming in.
Well, let me copy you then. Say, good morning, assalamu alaikum, namaste, sat sri akal, shalom, shaba khair. That's my limit.
That's great. Do you know what? This is Awaz Community Radio and you have addressed the entire community. Thank you for that. We also have some young people in the studio who will be talking to Mr. Khan about some topics that are relevant today. So thank you for coming in, Kyle.
Thanks for having me.
Hi, Darren.
Good morning.
Hi, Hamzah.
Good morning to you all.
And hello to Iman as well.
Good morning.
It's great to have you all in. So we'll be talking a little bit more about our local councillor. So anyone have any questions to Mr. Khan about his background or any kind of opinions you'd like to hear?
I've got a question for you, Mr. Khan.
Go for it.
I just wanted to know how difficult and how you found it when you first moved over here when you was 11.
I think it was difficult. If you just imagine, most people actually don't move around much in the world. And then if you imagine it, someone who's got whole family in one place, has been brought up in one particular culture, all the friends are there, and then suddenly to be plucked out and then to be put in another place, totally different culture, totally different language, you're not with your loved ones in a sense, and your friends' language, all those things are new. So it is difficult, I think. Most people actually don't quite appreciate. I struggled. It took me some time to settle down.
I was going to say, it's when you was 11, it's an awkward age, 11 for a young boy onto a new culture.
Absolutely. 11, 12 is a critical age. Yes, and that's probably why I struggled. I mean, if you're a bit younger, then probably it's easier to absorb. You don't have the strong roots. At that time, at age of 11, 12, you just sort of understand things. And then suddenly at that critical age to be shifted to another place. But to be honest, the other way of looking at it is, it's done me no harm. I'm doing reasonably well in life. I'm very content with my life. I get on with things. It has enriched my culture, my values, the understandings. So all that, the whole vision of the world, global ideas, I think I'm much better now if I had not done this. So there are a lot more pluses than the negatives.
Thank you.
I have a question for you, Mr. Khan. Did leaving school without qualifications affect how you went forward in life or hold you back at any point in your career?
At the time, when you're young, you don't think about it like that. You just can't wait to get out of school and so I can earn my own living. So that's what sort of motivates you and drives you. But then soon as you get into the real world, the life and the work, and then you realize life is tough. And if you don't have good qualifications, then your prospects are going to be dim. And I left like that. I was lucky, unlike nearly 1 million young people at the moment in Britain, who don't even have a job. I did get a job, but the job was a labourer in a cotton mill. Again, there's hardly any cotton mills left now, but it wasn't nice, it wasn't pleasant, very noisy, very damp. And after a few years, I thought to myself, do I want to spend the rest of my life working in an environment like this? And that probably was, the motivation for me to then go back into education, because I realized education is important. Education does open the doors. It does provide a ladder. And therefore, through the hard work, I worked, studied through a long process. Ultimately, I qualified, but in the same time, it gave me a real good broad base of understanding of different jobs. I've been a bus driver, I've been a youth worker, I've been a taxi driver, I've worked in a restaurant, I've been a policeman, and then ultimately qualified as a solicitor. So key message is, don't waste your opportunity when you're young. You should work hard, and if you haven't and you've been like somebody like myself, it's never too late, really. I remember when I was doing a law degree, and I used to think I'm a mature student, is it too late? And my first day there, I saw a retired pensioner woman there, and I thought, no, I'm a young guy. So it's never too late, seriously.
I've got a question for you, Mr. Khan. My barrier is that I didn't get any training when I started receptionist, because my mum already knew Dr. Nafisa, so she gave me this training here. My question is, what kind of training would young learners need to do their employment, and what are their barriers? What would be their barriers?
I think taking it away from an individual level to a wider idea, then I think the real issue is, how do we make sure that our education establishments are equipping us for the life that we're going to have to live? And the difficulty today's young people face, a generation like myself or one before me, you could go into one job and you could come out and retire in the same job. But now situation is, on average, each one of us will probably do 4-6 jobs in our working life. And therefore, the skill base that we need has to be broad. And we also have to understand that not everyone is going to go into higher education. The statistics are about half the people will be able to go to the higher education, half of them will not. So what we need to do is make sure that those other half are not left on the pile, that actually they also have alternative routes. And there are different routes you can use actually to qualify yourself, become a professional, make a good, reasonable progress in life. And I think we need to make sure that those routes are explored and those routes are then explained to young people at the right stage. Because one of the other difficulties is not having the right information, so that those young people actually then can see the route and they can see some hope, and therefore can exercise that right.
I just have a question. I know that you're quite successful now, but at some point you must have, barriers that you had to overcome to get to the stage that you are today. And I was just wanted to know, what barriers did you have to overcome?
Okay. I think the important point to understand for every one of us, that very few of us would get on a silver plate. We all have to struggle. We have to strive. And it's important to be determined to do well, and it's yourself. And my message generally has been, I'll give you share some experiences as well, but the message point of view is this, that I'm someone who came to this country at the age of 11. I had not a single pound in my pocket. I left school without sitting in any exams, and I usually make a joke that I left school with 9 no levels. Then basically started my working life as a labourer, And if I can then work and then qualify, become a professional, become a successful solicitor, and then ultimately to become the youngest and the first Asian Lord Mayor of this country, this Manchester, world-class city, then there's no reason why our young people should not think that they can do it. And there's no reason why they cannot be the Prime Minister of this country. And the key secret ultimately is aiming high and working hard. Both these qualities are actually with you, not with anyone else. So if you can have that, aim high, work hard, then the doors will open. You got to keep banging at them. Yeah. If I look back, there's always things which actually drive you. So I had this idea ultimately, in the initial stage, I was confused. I was all over the show. And that's why I didn't even bother sitting the exams. But then when I have worked and then I realized and I thought about it, and actually this moment of realization happened with me when I worked a night shift. I finished 6 o'clock and was walking home up on a hill. I used to be in Nelson Pendle area. It's quite a hilly area. And the Smith & Nephew was a huge mill. It was probably the only main sort of employer in that village. I walked up, so because I was on height, I could actually see the whole of the mill. And I turned around and stopped and looked at the mill. And this is when this thought came in my head, and do I want to spend the rest of my life here? So that was the moment of realization for me. And it wasn't difficult because of having had the experience of that mill and the work and the things I've described before to decide that no, this is not what I want. And then more thinking actually ultimately then brought me that I actually need to study. I need to get better qualification to open up those doors. Then I did that. But then again, just studying alone doesn't change things. You still have to have that drive. You need to aim high and you need to work for things. So I worked for different things. I worked in like I said, different jobs, and then ultimately as a solicitor. Now, most people would say that's great, but when I was a police officer, and this is something I'll share with you, it's going to take a little longer now, so I thought, go for it now. I applied for a leave without pay from the police, and I was knocked back. And they said that, no, you can't do this. You have to carry on working, and if you want to study, study part-time. And I thought to myself, this is too much. I want to get on with it. I'm not asking you to pay me. I'm asking you to leave without pay. What's your problem? You're going to have a person, an officer who will be better qualified, a graduate. And they said, no, you have to do this. So I then decided to leave. And I remember my chief superintendent at the time, he called me in and he said, Afzal, you're making a big mistake. You've got a good future in the police. You should carry on working here. Don't leave. And I looked at him straight in his face and I said, I will live with my mistake. Thank you very much. I left. I did my law degree, qualified as a solicitor, and a few years later I went back to see him, had a coffee with him, and I looked straight in his eyes. I said, sir, you said I'll make a big mistake. Here I am. I'm a qualified solicitor. I earn more than what you earn. I don't take any orders. I'm my own boss. And he looked at me, smiled, and he said, well done. So, you got to take those steps when even as people around you are saying, hey, they're having doubts about it. You have to have clarity in your own head. Again, when I said to you I became the youngest Lord Mayor, I thought about it, I went for it, and I went to see the leader of the council, Sir Richard Lees, and I said, look, I'm thinking of standing myself as the Deputy Lord Mayor. And he looked at me and he said, great. And I said, will you support me? And he said, yes, I'll support you. So my next question was, do you think I'm going to win? And he looked at me and he said, no. So I thought, uh-oh. Yeah, I thought as a leader, he's a big guy, he's got lots of influence. And if he's going to back me, I'm going to win. Yeah. And he said, he was so blunt, straight, he said, no. So I said, why? And he said, look, the guy you're taking on is someone who's very popular, someone who's more senior, and who has been trying to run for this position before you. So he has already spoken to people. So you're just coming in the last minute. So that's why I think you're going to lose. So I said, okay, let me think. So I thought about it, took some advice from some close friends, And they all said, no, go for it. You got nothing to lose. So what if you lose? Yeah. So you got to have that conviction as well, that even if I lose, so what? Yeah. At least I've tried it. Because if you don't try it, you've got no chance of winning. Your only chance is if you do it. So I then rang him, the leader, and I said, thank you for your advice. I am going to run it. And he said, well done, go for it. So I went for it, and the next day, I won by 3 votes. So, so this is important in the sense that I could have taken that advice. This is a big guy who really knows what he's talking about, and he's telling me I'm going to lose. I could have sat home and said, forget it, I won't bother trying. But I didn't. I said, no, I'm going to try. So I worked for it. I worked hard. I contacted people. And the day later, I actually won. So these are things that are, I think, important ideas where you have to, push. Even when the things don't look that bright, then you still have to. It's about, turning those challenges into opportunities. So those young people who are listening, they need to understand this, that ultimately, they have to try. It's not by sitting home that you change things. Change only happens, if you go for it and you seek for it. And the harder you work, the easier it gets.
So would you say that perhaps the younger generation need to be taking more risks in terms of being a bit more thinking outside the box, do you think, when it comes to career opportunities?
Yeah, I mean, end of the day, the risk has to be calculated as well. So I'm not advocating here that, you should go around taking it, but there are wrong risks as well. So they need to be careful. But what they need to be taking risk for is opportunities and trying. I much prefer someone who tries and fails and the one who doesn't even try. Because the one who doesn't try, he has got no chance. He's got a 0 chance of actually succeeding. But those who try, at least they stand some chance.
I'm from a visually impaired background. I'm visually impaired. I just wanted to know, on the same sort of level, what sort of things are out there for people like myself or disabled people.
Yeah. I mean, my first point would be that actually we're lucky to be born in this day and age. There are so many facilities. There's so much awareness, I'm not saying there's no challenges, there still are, but actually the situation now is far better than what it was 30 years ago. Yeah, there's lots of efforts being done to help various people with the disabilities of various kinds. But the message to you personally would be, just remember, there is not a single person who's perfect. We all have our own limitations. Yes. So you may have one limitation on the visual side of things, but you have many other gifts, and it's being able to harness those potentials that which will allow you to have a successful life. There are many great role models, who were totally blind. And yet, I find David Blanket as one example. He's a totally blind guy, and yet he's the guy who's one of the best education minister we've had. He did a reasonably good job, of it. And he operated at the top level in the British politics. So it's amazing, so it can be done. My own principal in Nelson and Cone College at the time when I was studied, again, he was a blind guy. And he used to paint his own house. I find it amazing. He was blind, and yet he used to do painting of his own house. So
you probably did a better job than
probably better than me, definitely.
I'm going into higher education university this September to study psychology. A lot of people are telling me that's the wrong choice because the work out there is so limited. Is there any advice you could give me about that?
My advice would be this. In life, we only have one life. It's being clear about that idea that you only have one life. And then the next question which comes is, what is it that I want out of this life? Because you're only going to have one shot at it. Yeah. So if you become clear with that idea, then it really doesn't matter what you do. As long as you enjoy what you do, long as you feel, that there is something you're doing which is fruitful, then it's not the money which is. Because I'll share with you something. When I worked hard, I've got a very poor background financially. I was adopted. And coming from such a background, then I'm working hard and then being able to become a partner. And in 2000, I became a partner with a medium-sized law firm. We had a good number of solicitors working for us. And so it was a time when the money was rolling in for me. If you imagine it, the difficulties and struggle that I've gone through, then I reach a point where I become a partner in a successful law firm where there's a lot of money going to start coming in now as well. And then very soon after that, I went through this phase of thinking. And I then decided that actually, and this is not what I want. And the question for me was this same question which I shared with you. I only have one life. What is it that I want out of my life? And I became very clear that actually I didn't want the money. And then I thought about it further. And I was earning about 100,000 in 2000. That's a lot of money, even now. And I thought, well, I only need about 20,000 to have a comfortable life. I mean, I don't drink alcohol. I don't gamble. I don't smoke cigarettes. So I can live comfortably with a small amount of money. Because these things are expensive, especially the gambling one. You never have enough money. No. So I then I said to myself, why am I killing myself, doing 50, 60 hours in this law firm, earning this lot of money, but actually I only need 20% of this. So that's when I decided, no, actually, what I want to do is, what I was really inspired about was actually my faith, because my faith taught me the best person is the person who brings benefit to others. The best among you is the best who brings benefit to others. So I thought I want to do things which make a difference to people's lives. So I'm not motivated by money. I'm not interested in it. I want money. I know money is important, but I don't want to, go on to this rat race where I'm just trying to make more and more money. I think it's just like a greed, and there's no end to greed. And that doesn't certainly bring you any happiness. It certainly doesn't bring you any contentment. So I then became very clear in my head, this is what I want to do. And if I shared with you this, this was 2000, and this is 2014, so it's 14 years, a long time. Yeah. And the secret is, not a single day have I ever thought that I've made a mistake. I love what I do. I enjoy it. I decide what I want to do, and I've never had a problem financially as well. I survive, comfortably. I drive a nice car. I've got a nice house. And it's not that, I've let go of those things. I've got them. But I don't need to kill myself just going after the money. So from my advice to you is, do what you love doing, what you enjoy. Don't worry, rest settles down.
Thanks everyone for all your questions, and thank you Mr. Khan for answering them. It's great to hear a bit of motivational speech as well for the younger generation. Now, moving on from discussing a bit about your background and about young people, let's discuss a little bit about what's been happening in the media. And one topic that's very relevant to the local community is a bit about the halal hysteria that's being whipped up in the press at the moment. What are your thoughts on this? I'm sure there's a couple of young people here in the studio who we were discussing before we started the show. Not everyone actually knows what halal is. So perhaps that's an important starting point. What is halal and how can we explain that to the people?
Okay. To start off with the definition idea, halal simply means something which is permitted, and the opposite to halal is haram, and that is something which is not permitted, forbidden, unlawful, language like that. So when we talk about halal in this context of the debate, what is talking about is basically halal meat, and that's about the way an animal is killed. Now, I understand an argument if somebody says, we should be vegans, we should be vegetarians. I understand that argument actually, and I have a lot of time for that argument. What I don't have time for is this whole hysteria, because I think what's going on here is actually nothing to do with halal meat, because whether you kill an animal, whichever way is killing actually. So the core root issue is you are killing an animal. So it can't be pleasant, it can't be that nice, yeah? So I think the bigger issue is Islamophobia, and that has a deeper question, why is it? And I think one idea is to do with the historical whole development of the world, how things are. There have been historical tensions, and therefore those tensions are then sometimes have deep roots. And the second issue is the political. Clearly, we live at an age where we are so much connected with one another. 50 years down the road, you never knew what was happening in the next town. Now we know what's happening anywhere in the world. The systems we have, the social media we have, the internet, the Twitter, the Facebook, the whole media 24 hour. So all those things really has made the world into a much smaller place. So there's much more awareness. And what makes it complicated is while some of the social media we are much more free, but some of the established media, there is a control. There are people, who own these places or these institutions, and they then have agenda, and they then decide for us what is a news. Why is that? In today's news, this item is a news that what Charles has said about Putin. Why isn't the Kenyan side bombing with 200, why isn't that more important? Or many other issues which are there, which are facing us. So there are people who are setting this agenda. So we then need to be aware of that. And then I think if you bring it back into this argument, I think, they talk about this issue. Why is it that they want to know about halal? Why are they not interested in animal welfare, how we farm? Because what happens is there's a real intense farming system which operates, and actually is designed not for the comfort of the animal. It's actually designed how they can make maximum profit. So they'll put them all together, lots of chickens, lots of sheep, all of them, and they give them injections to boost them quickly, steroids, so that they put the weight on very quickly, and then they can take them to abattoir and then slaughter them, yeah? So why are we not talking about that? Why are we not talking for tens and thousands of animals which are moved around, with no proper water, no proper rest, and they really put them into cage? Why are we not talking about millions of hens which are put into cages, and they can't do anything other than giving eggs, and they then only don't do that, they play with them in the sense that they use the lights so they can speed up the processes so they can have more eggs. It has a huge impact on the hen actually, because you're taking it away from the natural process. So there are many things like that which are there, which are more important. They don't want to talk about that. They want to talk about halal. Now, why do you think stunning an animal is any more humane? You know, having a bolt thrown through your brain is not pleasant. You know, if you're worried about cutting the throat, that's not nice. I accept it's not nice. But having a bolt in your head isn't nice either. So don't get mixed up. Yeah. So I think there are issues like that. And then the third point I would say on this is, why don't we operate on the basis of evidence? So why not, let's do more research. Let's find out. Because I'm not against, that there should be unnecessary suffering to any animal. As a person of a faith, every faith actually teaches you to be humane. Yeah? Even in the Muslim faith, there are rules about it. There are rules how the animal has to be fed even before killing, how the animal has to be watered, how the animal has to be even separated from other animals. The whole idea, there is a whole complex rules around it. How the actual cutting of the throat itself is a proper system. How do you make sure there's a quick drop of pressure in the brain so that the brain actually doesn't feel the pain? So why don't we do the research? Is it having a bolt in your brain less painful, or having the blood pressure quickly dropped where you lose the consciousness? Where is actually the evidence? So why not then do those debates based on evidence, then irrational this hysteria which is created, which then basically breeds more resentment, more confusion, more hate, more sort of communities being pulled apart when there's no need. So that's where I am on it.
It does seem like at the moment it seems acceptable to criticise the halal methods, but I agree with you that there should be more debate about animal welfare rather than criticising particular faiths. I know that the Jewish and Muslim communities are coming together on this, which is, it's great to see them coming together, but it's a shame that they're being targeted in order for them to come together on this issue. So has this helped you a little bit? I think, Kyle, we were discussing earlier before the show about you weren't aware what halal was.
Yeah, I was a bit wary about it. I mean, one day meat is meat, the next day halal pops up in the newspapers, and then there's loads of people talking about it, and I just it's come out of nowhere. I mean, I absolutely agree with Mr. Khan. Is it important? Does it deserve to be on the front page? And it's just madness. There's a lot more going on around the whole animal system, and it's just crazy.
Yeah. I think the other issue is also in the debate, why I think evidence-based idea needs to be brought in. There's an issue of quality of the meat. And our argument is, in the system of an animal, blood is the carrier of all the viruses and things. It's the blood system in ours as well, which moves all that. By draining the blood out, actually improves the quality of the meat. Now, if that is right, why don't we put that into the equation as well? Because by putting the bolt in, you're not actually draining the blood. And blood is an issue, So do you want unhealthy meat or you want a healthy meat? Why don't you put a debate like that?
Yeah.
It does.
And I think there'll be a lot more hands going up for healthy meat. We want a better meat. Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
It does seem that Islam as a faith is almost acceptable target by some members of the media. I mean, like Kyle said, you saw it in the papers, you didn't know what halal was. Mm-hmm. So your first impression is seeing headlines which were negative.
Yep.
And giving you and what was the word that you used? You said the word that it worried you.
Yeah, it worried me. I mean, how I was unaware of something and then it gets brought to your attention in a negative way. It's just done wrong, I think.
Yeah. I mean, there's evidence been done on this, that about 88% of the news as you hear on Muslims and Islam is actually negative. It's huge. So there is this current climate. And what it doesn't help in this climate also is the very culture of the media. Actually, I talked earlier on that there are people who own these things, and there is the issue of profit in there as well. So they're not driven by what's necessarily right and wrong. They're actually driven by how can we sell more papers? How can we have more viewers? and therefore when we do the advertisements, etc., we can charge more. So this whole bottom line, it becomes money actually, is the very greed idea I was talking about. And this then brings me to my idea of values, I think. I struggle with the world where, we as humans are probably the most complex and most able in the whole system. There are lots of living organs, organisms which are there, millions, billions of them, and we probably are the most sophisticated. And yet we have a world which has got so much resources, and you get a world where these very special individuals, humans, as we are in that sense, I'm getting that. Why is it, that there's about 1 billion humans who actually sleep at night with not having enough food in their stomach? Why is it, there's about 1 billion who have to go on diet? It's about the same on the opposite ends. Yeah, so they're getting too much.
Yeah.
And they then have to spend money to actually reduce, control. So this disparity, why in this world we can have hundreds of millions of people who have never had the luxury of simply having a clean glass of water, and yet we are comfortable spending 1.73 trillion, and that's one country, which is America alone, on the defense. That would wipe out all the debt in the world. And what does America want to do with thousands of nuclear bombs? What is it? What for? How many times do you want to destroy the world?
There does seem to be that culture of fear.
Yeah.
Isn't there? The culture of fear. And I believe that the media, Awaz Community Radio as a radio station is, I suppose, part of the media. And we feel a sense of responsibility now. And it perhaps
but
sounds
at least you
idealistic.
do a good program like this.
Of course. But we feel that it's good to have an honest debate, not a debate where there is a hidden agenda. Our agenda is out in the open, and it is to bring the community together. And we are against anything that divides the community. So something like this is very important.
It's a good principle, absolutely. And I think we need to do more of this. This is the point I was saying about this culture. If you do some good stuff, you'll have a hell of a job getting this into the paper. Do something bad, they'll splash you on the front page. Why is it that we put value on the negativity more, not on the positivity? Why? So I think that's the challenge I'm putting forward, really, that the media itself needs to look at itself. Media also has a responsibility to the society, and not just cashing in,
That takes us quite nicely onto the topics of discussing the rise of far-right views through the parties such as, it's more UKIP than BNP that is on the rise at the moment. And I think it's quite a good discussion, really, to have with people who will be out to vote tomorrow, as this is being recorded on Wednesday the 21st of May, and we have the European elections tomorrow. And they are predicting that across Europe, they're expecting quite a lot of votes going for far-right parties. Now, I'm happy to bring this out to the people in the studio here, as well as Afzal Khan. Why do you think people are turning to UKIP rather than the traditional sort of Labour, Tory, Lib Dem parties?
Well, let me declare my interest now. Like in the introduction, I am one of the candidates for the European election for the Labour Party. And I'm following this very closely. I have a vested interest. I find it saddening, actually, seeing such a rise in this of BNP. BNP is not that much, but I hope we're going to get rid of it. To our shame, we have a representative of Northwest whose message is nothing but hate, who's done absolutely nothing in the last 5 years. But also the UKIP, actually. when I analyze UKIP, I see that they have two messages, and that is immigration and being out of EU. Now, I think being out of EU, if I take that first, I feel that what they're trying to do is trying to give a very simplistic answer, that somehow if we pull out of EU, it's going to solve all of our problems. The truth is, that's not what's going to happen. We're not in the 18th century, we're in the 21st century. The whole global connection is totally different. I've already explained that earlier on. So we are actually connected. Not only that, half of our trade actually is connected with the European Union. Can you imagine someone who's in a business and you say to them, well, we're going to stop dealing with half our customers? Does that make sense? And then even if you say, well, if we come out, well, we can still do business. Well, the problem then you have is you're going to pull out and you're not going to have a say. So the rules those European Union make, you still have going to have to comply with. So how is it sensible that you have no input, but you still want to follow them? Because if you don't follow them, you can't trade. And we've already seen other countries, who are not part of EU, but still have to follow all those rules. Denmark is one of those. I think it's Norway. They're paying 80% of all the cost. They're following all the rules that are coming out, and yet they have no say in it. How is that sensible for us as a Britain, So I think this whole idea of out of EU is not a sensible one. It's not where the world is moving, especially when you think about that in the world you have to deal with China, which has got 1.2 billion people. You have to deal with India, which has got about 1.2 billion. And the whole EU countries put together, there are only 500 million. You're still even less than half. So that gives us the clout by being in it. It gives us the biggest economy, so we can then dictate things and we can get things done better. In a group, you have more strength than as an individual. This is a simple formula in life. Yeah, as a team, you do better than as a single player. So why do you think that by working together as 28 countries, you will be weaker? No, you'll be stronger. So I think that this message is totally wrong. The second message is immigration. Again, there may have been a time when we were island and therefore didn't have much to do with the world. But last 300-400 years, we had a lot to do with the world. For a start, we ruled half the world. Britain ruled virtually half the world. They're saying that the sun never sets in British Empire. Where does that come from? Because such was the huge nature of our empire. So why do we think it was okay for us to go around rule half the world, but it's not okay for somebody else to come here? It just doesn't make sense. And the second point then is, well, I'm not saying that as a country, we should have open borders. That's not what the issue is. So if you take EU, the European issue first, well, actually the number of people coming in from European Union and the number of us going out to live in the European Union is about same. So if 20 leave, 20 come in, what's your big problem? Now if you make it the bigger issue of the whole immigration, then yes, of course, we have a limited space and we have limited facilities, limited schools, limited hospitals, and therefore there has to be some sort of management. So what we need to have is a good management system. So why don't we work with that to have a better system? Because we know that research after research, what it shows is that actually immigrant communities, they come in and they contribute more than what they take out. And why is it bad when you think about it another way? A person, as a human, if you chart the whole life, then what you have is the middle life is the one which is the most productive. Early age, is the one when you invest into you and you grow and develop and you educate and all that. And then from then to the end of the life, the last few years, again, 10, 15, it can be difficult. It's quite expensive. But the most productive is the middle chunk. So if that's the case, what is your problem when from another country, an able person, mostly professionals, skilled people, are coming here, working, making the wealth for you, and giving you taxes when you made no investment in them? Another country's made the investment. Yeah? So why are you so hooked up with that issue? And I think if we look at it in the right perspective, and if we manage the immigration in a right manner, then actually we've seen again and again that actually it does us good. It doesn't do us harm. It benefits us. They put in more than what they take out. And they also enrich us. And this is, and again, you can't put a value on it. And then if you look, project it forward with the world we are in, how we're going to be connected up. You know, it's not an accident that the more diverse the city is, the most prosperous they are. This is proven. So all the world-class cities in the world actually are also the most diverse. So diversity actually adds something. It doesn't take it away. So we need to again look at it in that context, that if we're going to be dealing with the world, then the more people have of different parts, they can be the bridge. And that's also a plus. So I think this whole UKIP idea, they have no solution. They just do empty slogans, and because we are going through a difficult time with this financial crisis, which banks have brought on us, they don't want to do anything with the banks. You know, they don't want to block the bank bonuses that these very people, you know, we have to pour the money in to save. They even make losses, and they still get millions of pounds of bonuses. They don't want to cap them, because Farage himself is a banker, actually. Yeah, he doesn't want to do that. He says to me and you, oh, I'm with a common person, you know, I'm going to stand up for you. But what are you doing in the real sense? You know, the real issue you're not dealing with. You don't want to deal with the bankers who created this mess. And you want the rest of us to become this backward-looking, narrow-minded Britain, which we're going to have less than weight, less influence. How is that good for us? So I think it's empty words, no solutions, and the people really need to look at his policies. You know, how is it his policies of not taxing the bankers, managing these bonuses? How is it privatizing the health service, you know, which is one of the best service that we have, is bad for us? Why is he then saying, you know, it should be jobs for the British, and then he employs his own German wife, you know, not giving jobs to somebody else? Why is he getting his own material printed in Germany? Why not print it here? It's just a hypocrite, is actually. The more you look at it, the more you see he's just playing with words. As soon as you look closely at it, it just falls apart. There isn't anything there. He has no solutions. So we as a country, we as a voters, we need to really look at the answers, not just simply this. But I think this whole support for UKIP is not just this. It's not just issue of racism, and it's not just issue of EU. I think there are other issues as well, where people feel dissatisfied, they not feel engaged, and therefore they don't fully understand what the European Union is all about. You know, not many people understand so many different good things that have come out of European Union, which we have all benefited. And we all do it every day without realizing actually it's come from Europe. You know, this mobile phone, we've got the roaming charges, which has been capped, which has been controlled. It's come from European Union. If you got a job and you work, you have a break, regular breaks. Where does that come from? It comes from the European Union. You know, if you get regular holidays in a year, where does that come from? It comes from the European Union. You know, there's so many safety things, good things, which have come there, which has made a better life for all of us. We don't actually realize that it's coming from Europe. And that's the bit we need to understand. And if the young people, for example, you know, 20 billion they've allocated to help the unemployed young, you know. The research in science and that, 80 million, you know, has been allocated. So I think there's so much. We just need to look at it a bit more in depth, and we need to look at it in a wider sense, not only in the current difficult times. And the difficult times, we need to be pulling together, working together to get the solutions, not really drive our communities apart, put wedges in there, because that's not the solution. And I think the BNP and UKIP are doing that.
Those parties definitely seem like parties who are preying on fear and the worries and concerns of other people. So I'd like to put it out to the people in the studio today. How do you feel about how UKIP is representing itself, how it's portraying itself in the media. What are your kind of points of view? What do you know about UKIP and what have you learned?
I don't really know too much about them, to tell you the truth. You see them on the TV, you see them on the news and that, don't you? And like you say, it's just bringing up the certain things. One question I did want to ask, and I don't know if it's thingy, was...
Go for it.
You mentioned Norway, and not in the EU. How do they prosper then?
No, they're paying 80%. They're paying 80% of the cost of being in the EU. So let's say if we were paying £100, they're still paying EU £80. So my argument is, what's the point? Still paying 80%, yeah, but not having a say in it. I like to have a say. You know, if the rules are being made, yeah, I like to have a say. What I don't want is I pay a tax as well, yeah, and then I can't have a say as well. Who taxes me?
Yeah.
I suppose you can
That's
liken
the point
it.
I'm making with the Norway example. Yeah, I mean, both of us probably not an expert to really go into depth how they do it. You know, it maybe it's a very small country and they have lots of oil. You know, they can then get away with it. Yeah.
Yeah.
But we may not have that amount of oil. We have some, but it's not that much. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's more complex. But the principal point I'm getting at is, you know, I would prefer to have a say. Yeah. Than to having to follow something without having to have a say. I don't mind, you know, following something, providing I have my own input into it.
You could even like it to perhaps being part of a club. So if you've paid membership, you've got that reduced rate. Do you understand? You know how some clubs work that way, so a sports club. And if you're out with, you pay the full cost. So you are still able to, you know, other countries are still able to trade, but it's favourable when you're within the union. Sort of better rates.
Yeah. And it's like, another way of looking at it is, it's about 28 countries, isn't it? Well, what do they do? What they try to do is try to harmonize things so that the same rules are being applied. So therefore, if you want to move, for example, anywhere in these 28 countries, you don't need a visa. Now, if you were not in the EU, then you need to apply. So you need to apply for 28 visas if you want to go to 28 countries. And that's a simple example. But same thing, if you want to take something, let's say a lorry full of stuff which you want to sell somewhere, yeah. But every border you get to, you will then have to produce all the documentations and papers. But if you're part of the EU, you don't need that. So these are the things, how they simplify them, yeah. They standardize them across the board. It's the same with the issue of safety. You know, if things are coming in, let's say from China, then you basically make sure that when they come into the EU, there is a standard which they have to follow, the safety of the toys, etc., and all those, yeah. So they will then do that. Otherwise, you know, you have to do each country. So I think it's examples like that you can see why it makes sense.
You could see that becoming another barrier to employment.
Yes.
Because that isn't one of the things about the European Union. You've got freedom of movement of labour.
Yeah. That's right. One of the principles is freedom of movement. Basically means that you are free to work anywhere. You know, so why not? You know, if a young person like you know, you can't find a job here, isn't it better that if you had more places to go to find a job than having less places? Well, why not? You know, especially with this day and age. You know, let me share with you an example of why I think it's a different world we're living in and why I don't agree with the UKIP's version. You know, this halal discussion we had. Denmark passed rules stopping that. So we got some community groups together and I went there. And I left in the morning on a plane. I went to Denmark. I had a meeting with this minister. I did some radio and television interviews. Then I spent about 2 hours just going around the city center there just to look at the city, yeah. And then around 7 o'clock I was back in Manchester. Now, this is how things are now. This wasn't like this 50 years ago. You know? Nobody would even dream of this. But in a day, I was able to go all the way to Denmark, do my business, do my interviews, do my sightseeing, and then still back in Manchester in the evening, 6:45. It's amazing, isn't it? So, you know, we can do that. And it's not that expensive as well. You know, 30, 40 pounds, you can get a flight. This is cheaper than going to London.
It is.
It does sound like there's a lot to be, there's a lot more to gain from staying within the union.
I think so. That's my view, definitely. I think it's not perfect. I'm not saying that. I think there are things that need to be changed. We need to improve things. Ultimately, we need to make sure that the European Union works for the people of Europe, works for the people of the Northwest. So we need to do that. But the idea is you can't do a change from outside. It's so much easier doing a change from inside. And that's the difference. And that's the argument. What they are advocating, the Conservative and the UKIP, is the idea of being outside, actually, not necessarily being inside. I prefer being inside, around the table, discussing it, and then coming through. And it's also about building consensus, building relationships. If 28 countries are going to sort of work together, then the way forward is by talking to each other, not from outside, and not by threatening, we're going to pack our bag. It just doesn't work. It doesn't work in our life, in human life. It doesn't work in the country levels as well. It's the same principles.
Okay, I just wanted to discuss things about universities nowadays. 9 grand, which is a lot, and plus they have to think about finding work, and after that they still have this big huge debt to pay, which makes it really hard for students, I think.
Yeah, I feel very uncomfortable. I've given you about my own life experiences as a mature student who went in and then studied. And I say to myself, I have a simple formula how I look at things when I'm an elected person. I say to myself, how do I feel about this as if it's to me? Would I want it in my backyard? So I ask questions like that, and I come to conclusions of my positions on it. And I say to myself, if I had to pay £9,000 when I studied, would that have allowed me to do that? Would that have encouraged me? And the answer is straightforward, no. Actually, I would not have studied. So I feel this 9,000 is too much. And my second reasoning is that ultimately having an educated young people is good for the young people, and it's also good for the society, for all of us together collectively. And therefore it's only fair that the contribution is done by both. So I would very much, and I think that would be the position of the Labour, that we will look at this. We don't agree the 9,000 is right, we think it's too much, but we think there has to be some payment by the student as well. And society needs to help the student as well. And then we have to have right systems where we can make sure they start only paying once they start earn. And if they don't have money coming in, they don't want to be with a fear. So we need to sort all that out ultimately, so that they can make small payments as their contribution. And we as a society should pay some contribution, because we're going to benefit from a young person, because the young person is a fact now that anyone who's gone through higher education, who's graduated, is going to be most likely to earn at least $500,000 more than someone who isn't. So if they're going to get $500,000 more, we will get $500,000 more taxes. So it's not a bad investment. What's the problem?
I'd like to say a very big thank you to our special guest, Councillor Afzal Khan, who's standing for European Parliament. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to come in and have a chat with us.
Thank you very much. I really enjoyed all the questions, and well done to all the young people who put those questions, and wish you all the best for your radio station, the good work that you're doing here.
Thank you very much. And thanks to Iman, Hamzah, Darren, Kyle. Thank you all for coming in and contributing. Hope you've all enjoyed being part of the show.
Yeah, thanks for
Thank
having
you.
us.
Thank you.
You've been listening to Awaz Community Radio. You can ring us on 839 7857. You can catch us on Facebook, Awaz Community Radio, or tweet us, Awaz Radio 122. You've been listening to Awaz Community Radio with your host, Saira. Thank you for listening.